Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to another episode of the My DW podcast. Today joining us is Emily King, one of our very first stand-up paddleboarders who completed last year. Emily, thank you for coming and joining us. And how are you?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me along.
Yeah, and obviously, as ever, this podcast is all about going through paddlers' experiences of DW. The first two people that have been on, Paul Fielden and Peter Walker, very experienced paddlers, both obviously having done several finishes. Obviously, slightly different in your case because the stand-up paddleboard class only joined last year. What was it like finally, obviously, with the stand-up paddleboard class coming up and being one of the first of the two crews that completed the race?
Oh my God, it was such a special moment. It really was. It was high alert all the way because obviously we didn't know what, how, where, when, whether we were going to make the times, what was sort of going to happen, how it was all going to play out. So most of our training had been by ourselves on waterways similar to, but nothing prepared me for the level of energy and excitement, and actually coming up to the finish line and just seeing loved ones, people that had invested time and energy into us, and just feeling that wave of emotion and relief coming over the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to the very start, then sort of like, how did DW come onto your radar?
Oh, so I guess for me it was a case of I was looking for a new challenge. I'd been a stand-up paddleboard mid-distance champion for the UK and paddleboarded for the UK as well and Wales. And sort of turning a little bit older and having done that, I was looking for something that would give me the reason to be interested in paddling again competitively. And funnily enough, I'd had a friend who had done DW in a kayak before, and I'd sort of said, "What's that? And how's that happen?" And wow! And she sort of said this golden phrase, which is, "It's the Everest of paddle races," and that was it. I was hooked. It was like, okay, send me the paperwork. And so that was a year prior to releasing the fact that paddleboarders could come on. And when it popped up on my Facebook, that it was just like fate. So I downloaded the rule book and went cross-eyed and said to my husband, "Oh, I don't know. Do you reckon we could have a go at this? We've got to sit down and do some maths in and around what can happen, and probably some time trials and some training." So we set to really and went, yeah, this is a goer. But it was a bit touch and go to begin with. Was I capable of it? It was a new type of challenge to me. It was very structured as well, the way the race is run, which there's nothing wrong with. But short mid distance racing, you sort of get used to it all being done quite quickly. So in a day, whereas when you've got to deal with sort of 4 days and logistics and a rule book that's quite tight as well, that's just another level.
Yeah, and you say obviously it's different to sort of the races you've done in the past. I mean, just how different is it for people that might not be aware from, people that haven't done stand-up paddleboard and racing before? Like how different is DW compared to obviously normal marathon races?
Yeah, so a lot of the marathon races that occur in the UK at the moment are probably, I would say, mid to entry level. So, it's really inclusive for people that have never done that sort of 1 day 30, 40K before. And it's also, got a competitive fleet for the elites as well. Which is great, and it's very relaxed. Everybody's very supportive, but it's a race in a box, if you like. You can get it done in 1 day. There's not too much logistical planning. There's lots of people and friends along the way, and fellow paddlers within the community. So DW, I'd say, is probably the step above that in terms of, because it is such a big race over sort of those 4 days. There's so much more to think about, and the time cut-offs obviously are there to stimulate you to be the best paddler you can be, but it just means you can't do it as a leisure paddler because you're always against the clock. So it's a slightly different level of racing, and if you've never done anything like that before, it doesn't mean you can't do it, because absolutely you can, but you just need to do a bit of planning and a bit of training and think about what, how, where and when you're setting yourself up to succeed in that race rather than just trying to wing it, because it's not a race that you can just turn up and wing. You need a crew. You need to know that you can hit the race times. You need to know that your body's going to hold up for those 4 days, because in a day you can have 4 seasons. In a day you can have 4 different types of water, and you've got to get up. And as a sup, you will be on the start line at 6:30 in the morning the next day.
And was that a new element for you in terms of different types of waterways for a start? Obviously, in the same race, I know obviously it was split over different days because obviously sup paddlers do it as a stages race. But did that take a little bit of sort of adjusting to in terms of going on to different types of waterways?
Yes, I would say it did. We start with canals, which are, fine, you think nice and gentle and nice and easy, but oh no, not last year. We had wind blowing up them, and those hard edges really do funnel that wind as well. So there is no hiding from the wind, and there's certainly no flow. And then with regards to all the portages as well, again, it's if you're doing sort of 17 portages carrying your board, a 14-foot board above your head or being lifted with kit as well, even if it's just for 500 metres, and then getting back in, if you repeat that 17 odd times in a day, it's pretty exhausting. So, it is a very different type of water, even on the canals. And then when you get to the Thames, you've got flow as well. So there's some quite big funneling parts of weirs and locks. So you've got to really understand what water that flows and moves is. So I was British whitewater champion on SUP as well. So that knowledge came into really good players. And how to utilise the water as well to get the best advantage. Because what you don't want as well is to be knocked in by different moving water patterns. So just having that, I'd say sort of level 1, level 2 rapids, very, very low level whitewater, but just being able to read moving water is really crucial too.
Well, you said obviously like the headwind and stuff, obviously being stood up, obviously, I mean, that obviously makes a bit of a difference to stability. I mean, that's a different thing I think a lot of DW paddlers and people within the DW community might not have like much experience with. I mean, just how much does that really affect you? Because obviously everyone gets the wind factor from like the paddles, for example, but not from obviously being battered by across your whole body for the whole duration of a day. I mean, how does it affect your stability?
So again, knowing your kit's really important, and choosing the right kit as well. So if you've got the right board, then that can obviously be something that can help you cut through that wind and cut through that water. So a nice pointy fronted sort of race board, which is low profile to the water, really helps with that. And weight ratios of your craft as well are really important too if you're coming up against a wind, or in fact, those waves coming back at you. And then on top of that, if you are used to paddling in wind as a paddleboarder, you can move around on your board and stand in different places, or also have different standing frames. And we have something called choking down on the paddle, so we can almost go into a squat position and paddle halfway up the shaft of the paddle, which again lowers the profile and the wind resistance. And also a bit like a windsurfer as well, you can utilise how you angle your body into the wind too, so the wind cuts off of you, and actually you can sometimes use it to help you drive the board forwards as well. As in somebody that sails has that sort of knowledge too, which can be quite useful. But again, it's all practice. If you've never paddled into a headwind before for sort of an hour, 2 hours, then you need to get that into your training. What you need to do is you need to just absolutely understand your kit, go out and practice in all conditions, and don't be scared to fail on your training and get tired and get it wrong, because that's where you're going to learn the most. And get people's help as well. There's loads of really experienced paddlers out there that will give you some top tips and go out there and show you what's best to do in those situations.
Over that first day in particular, you were just saying about the portaging earlier, obviously it's 34 and a half miles of paddling that first day, and 35 portages, obviously most of which come sort of around the Crofton area. How did you get on with that personally during that first day of the race?
So when I'm training for an event, I leave nothing to chance. So I couldn't manage to do the stages race, and for probably best to explain what the stages races are before the Reading, is it the Reading Club Run?
So you've got the waterside races, yeah, and then you've got the Thames sides, yeah.
So I couldn't make those dates, but what they are races that do the the legs of the DW, and it gets the paddlers out and used to those lengths that you were just talking about. So I couldn't do those. So actually my husband and he came and crewed for me, and I just paddled those lengths anyway, but by myself, because what I wanted to do is be familiar with the environments and how it would feel when I was on the water. So I trained before I got to the race to deal with doing that. And I know that Paddy lives in Ireland, so there was no way he could get over to the UK to do it beforehand, but he specifically went and did lock training as well, or portage training too. So for when I actually was on DW, I knew how to pace myself and where I was going to portage in and portage out, and how much energy I needed to put in, or how much I could relax between the locks before I had to get out and carry the board again. And there are a couple that are really, really long. So even to the detail that I was working out, because with the stand-up paddleboard, we can carry it on our head or we can carry it on either side. So I was working out how long a distance is before I need to turn the board, because it cuts in under your arm and sits on your hip a little bit. So it was down to really that training and that race plan. And then I knew that I could just rely on that and be comfortable, so that I could get to the next one and not be fatigued.
Well, what were the most challenging aspects of the race like? Obviously, you've got a few unique challenges with DW. I mean, yeah, what sort of really challenged you during last year's race?
So actually, I sort of had to think about that before I started the race. What was really going to challenge me? And it was like, yeah, it's going to be the fatigue of the locks, because basically it's like having a HIIT workout in the middle of a race, isn't it? It's like, yay, let's go and do a HIIT class and carry things above our heads when we're at our most tired. Go for it. So I thought that would be the case. It wasn't. The ability to remember, because I didn't know the race well, or the race course well, where I was going left and where I was going right. And as a supper, there were no other suppers around me. So there wasn't really, unless there was a kayak coming by me or something, there was no one to follow. So it was just the fact that I was working so hard that I couldn't switch into my memory brain to remember where the course was going, etc. So it was a bit frustrating sometimes, because it was a bit of a, am I going the right way? Aren't I going? And that's all lost energy. That's it, and that was frustrating to me as well. And then just knowing that you are X amount of time away before that next cruise stop, and thinking to yourself, am I going to see anybody before then, or am I just going to be on that leg myself? And that's quite haunting, because you're trying to set your own pace, but your brain starts to think about other things, and that's like, is somebody coming up behind me? Am I by myself? Am I keeping going in this wind? How can I keep going? Because if you've got somebody in front of you, you pace yourself with them, or at least they become the mark, even if they go away from you, and then that can keep happening and keep coming through. But sort of on that day too, it was a long time by myself in very difficult conditions.
Yeah, and that's one of the unique things for the subclass, I think, in the part of obviously the 4-day race, is that because it's quite compact, isn't it? Obviously you've got the junior doubles, you've got the endeavours, vet junior, so there's a lot of paddlers covering a short distance, and therefore actually generally it's quite busy on the water. There's always boats going past. If you had like a support crew or a spectator, for example, there's a constant stream of boats passing each other and being there on the water. But obviously that was slightly different, for, as you say, for the stand-up paddleboarders, where you could have long periods by yourself. How did you sort of cope with that? How did you manage that during the race? When you had those periods, especially as you say, like out on the Thames, where obviously it can be quite wide in places as well. How did you sort of like just motivate yourself and manage that kind of isolation?
I think for a paddleboarder, the scariest thing is when you're on high-sided by yourself. I mean, the Thames isn't that scary because there's river banks and you can just scramble, so that's fine. It's more when you're sort of isolated and you're not coming across roads, or there's no contact with anyone, so you're very focused on paddling at that point, because you need to just take your mind into what you're doing and not let it run. So for me, I count. I count in about 10 languages to 100 just to keep the stroke rate up and just to stay very, very focused on it. But you also need to be careful that you're breathing as well, and that your breathing doesn't go shallow, because it's all anxiety if you're not breathing properly. And remember, we're using our whole torso. We're lifting, we're rising, and so we become very fatigued through our torso very easily. And once you're not getting enough oxygen, then your muscles start to starve and your brain starts to go a little bit. So it's just remembering to just have a really good technique the whole time and make every paddle stroke count, but also focus on what's coming up, because you've got, I think some of the scariest things were, not scary, but, things that might worry people, or certainly I had to be mindful of, were when we had some fast flowing weirs which were coming off the Thames. And actually when we got to Reading, there's a part that goes through the centre of Reading, and it's concrete high sides, and I was being blown backwards on it at one point, standing up, so I had to drop to my knees really quickly because the board started to turn, but then we had a massive weir up behind us, and it can all get a little bit chaotic. And so that it's just being mindful and being in the moment that's really, really important. And you've got to make sure you've got enough hydration and enough food, and that you are taking that on board, because again, otherwise it just adds to that anxiety and the ability to not function properly. Make it sound terrible, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, obviously, we spoke obviously a lot about the challenges of it, and obviously it is a hard race. That is why the race exists. It's meant to be a challenge, and as you said, it's deemed as sort of like the Everest of paddling, in a sense of, because of the challenge it gives you and the satisfaction you can get after it when you do complete it. But I mean, what did you most enjoy about the race?
So again, as I said at the beginning, it was the fact it was something so new and something so incredible to go and try. We didn't know if we'd make the cut-off times. We didn't know, as in Paddy and I, if we were up to the challenge. So I remember saying to the race director, this isn't a race, this is an adventure race, halfway through. Because it really is, you have to find out so much about yourself, and whatever you think you're timesing it by 100. So everything is doable on that race, with the right mindset and the right support crew and the right training. And it's the beauty of it is once you put all that together and you go out there and you are tested, how you feel when you achieve that each day at the end of it, because you are just like, dang, this is great. I am just nailing this. And yes, I've got some learnings to take with me tomorrow. We need to do things differently or whatever. But yeah, it's just brilliant. It really is.
I can sort of testify how much you did enjoy it, because I was there when you crossed the line and came off the water at Barnelms, and I don't think I've seen anyone happier getting off the water, having enjoyed the ride down from Teddington.
And I was just determined not to let the boats leave me too far behind. So I was just giving everything that I had left in the tank, and I think I even managed a little sprint over the line at the end too.
Yeah, and obviously Barnelms was a brand new finish, so obviously one of the first finishes, obviously for our new finish location. It was quite an atmosphere down there as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's a great venue because it's a proper amphitheatre, so you can see the crowd as you're paddling under the bridges and coming on, and actually people have got the opportunity to come up the paths as well. And I had a few suppers join me as well, to cheer me down. And then as you're sort of coming along, it's this crowd on the right-hand side, and you can hear them and feel the energy. And it's just amazing because everybody stands at the waterfront and just cheers you on. And then you've got to go up some steps, and someone said, oh, let me carry your board for you. And I'm like, no, I've just paddled this whole race. I am carrying my own board up, thank you.
Is there anything you would have done differently during the race, or do you think sort of your race plan, as it were, kind of went to plan, as it all unfolded?
Yeah, I very much felt that the race plan was executed as we'd intended it, and it was the formula works, which was great. What would I do? Well, do you know what the thing is we had a tough year last year, so if there's anything I'd do differently, I really couldn't say at this point, because I'd need to read the conditions, the week before the race, to make those changes. Because if it's going to be hotter, if it's going to be less wind or more flow, that's those decisions that I've got to look at closer to the time. But in terms of the overall project management of it and of my training, I was really, really happy with it.
As you said earlier, about support crews, obviously a bit of a sort of a slight change, I suspect, obviously in terms of the races you've done, obviously, and how long your support crew have got to be out for across the whole 4 days, getting, to all those portages and locks and different places to keep finding you and feeding you. How did all that sort of work for you?
Yeah, I mean, the teams that support you, they are equally as impressive as we are on the water. In fact, I think we probably have the easier job because we've pre-planned everything. We've trained everything. They've got to drive through London traffic and find somewhere to park, which is no easy feat either. So again, we practiced that, and it didn't necessarily go well in the practicing days, but hey, that's why that's why we run the practices first, so we get it all out the way. And on the training runs, actually, when we came down to London, I think there were two that I out paddled. My husband was my crew with my 9-year-old son, and they just saw me disappearing off and they couldn't get me, so they had to just then avert and try and find somewhere else to meet me. They are brilliant. They are really, really good. You know what? I have full kudos to anyone that crews, because as competitors, we're sort of in a tunnel, and specifically with SUP, mentally. So our communication skills probably aren't the best at that time. And yes, we sometimes want to laugh, sometimes want to cry, sometimes want to shout. And they've got to be ready just to wrap their arms around us, chuck a food, chuck a drink, fill us up, and just take anything that we're prepared to throw at them. And it's just incredible. And then they've got the stress of getting in the car and getting to the next point and making sure they've got everything and stuff doesn't get knocked over. And, you know, it can all go wrong. So I just got to say they are brilliant. But as a paddler, knowing that you're heading towards them, not just for the substance of food and drink or whatever, it's just knowing there's a friendly face, and not just your crew, but all the other people's crews as well, because everybody is so kind. And you know what, even if you're passing through a checkpoint that somebody else has put their crew at and your crew's not, people say to you, do you want something? Can we give you something? And it's just so lovely. Or you'll get loads of people clapping and cheering, and it's granny, granddad, auntie, uncle, friends, kids, you name it. And it just keeps you going along, because you know, the next Mexican wave's coming in a minute, and it's lovely. It really is.
If you're training for the ThruDark Devizes to Westminster International Canoe Race or any long-distance paddling event, you need to have your nutrition strategy prepared. Precision Fuel and Hydration provide education and products for events like the DW, and my go-to are their PF30, PF30 caffeine and PF90 gels. They taste clean and simple, they're easy to take on the move, and the amount of carb in each is on the front of the packet, so you can keep track of how much you're taking on. The PF90 even has a resealable top, which makes it perfect for long paddles. Their electrolyte tablet comes in different strengths, and for me, there isn't a better option out there for staying hydrated during the DW. Check out the link in our show notes to read Precision's guide on how to fuel and hydrate for the DW. And if you have any questions about your strategy, then you can also book in for a free video call with their team and talk it through with an actual human. So, Emily, obviously you can't go and tackle this race without doing some kind of training, or a reasonable amount of training even. How did you go about it? When did you start training?
So training is vital, because you are conditioning your body to go through an enormous amount of stress, specifically for paddleboarding as well. First thing to say is that stand-up paddleboarding is really a great sport in terms of that it's a non-impact sport, so it shouldn't put a lot of aggression through your body. But when you do it for 5 days, it's accumulative. So yes, it is. So yes, I did have to do training, because I want my body to last outside of doing DW, and I want to do further events later in the year as well. But also, because it's 4 days, you don't really want to get to day 2 or 3 and then find out that you're breaking and you can't carry on. So training for me started, I think after the second week of December last year. I'd been lightly paddling and doing a few bits and pieces and a lot of SUP surfing. But yeah, I made the decision to get back out and start doing the miles. And yeah, that was something that we really, really had to think about and sit down and plan. So we looked at the rule book first of all, and actually tried to understand what the race was and look at what I was going to have to achieve per hour, per distance, on each day. And then we started the same as I would for endurance running, accumulatively putting in the training sessions. And I was working full time last year as well for one of the paddle bodies. So my time on the water was quite limited at weekends. So the training that I was doing was some land-based and some short paddles. And then at weekends, I started opening up into distance paddles. And that incorporated then towards the end of the run, going down and doing those stages and looking at the canals. And I think I did 1 2-day paddle as well towards the end. And then before DW itself, there was a big famous race called the Sub 12, which is based in the UK on Paignton Beach. And that was a 12-hour race of laps on the ocean and portaging up through a land gate as well. So that was the week before DW. That gave me the legs to be able to cope with 5 days.
You said it obviously a minute ago that you looked through the rule book and try to work out and calculate what speed you needed to do to obviously reach the time.
We name it the manual instead of the rule book.
No.
That was too grown up and stiff. Let's call it the manual.
But going through, obviously, you looked at obviously the times of what you needed to do and what your speed you needed to do to achieve that and make it through. Did it feel achievable from before you started your training? Did that feel like an achievable sort of measure for you?
In terms of what I'd done, yes, very much so. But because it's endurance and you're running it, I mean, we had to do it in the same time as the boats, whereas this year, when SUP's now a class of its own, we've had an extension on the time, so it's even more doable now. But we had to look at things like how long were the portages going to take us? What was the ratio to kilometre per hour that I was going to do on pace? But also I needed to build in a little bit of a firewall hour as well, so that if anything did go wrong, then, I wasn't trying to chase my tail, because the last thing you want to do is accelerate on endurance. You need to work at a pace which you've trained for and just stay at it, because the moment you start to exceed that, then your energy is just gone and it just wrecks you. Or, if the conditions change, which is great that it was one of the windiest years ever. So that was out the window straight away. So we did. We went down and simulated in and around Wales on the oceans and the canals as well, sort of trying to get those 4 or 5 hour paddle times. And I was working, I think, about 7 to 8 kilometres an hour, and then working out how often I needed to take on either my aqua pack being filled up or nutrition, or how much nutrition that I was carrying. Because in the boats, the participants have kit bags and they take them out for the portages or don't, and it's generally in the classes that I was seeing, they were carrying the boats between 2 of them. Well, it's just me and I'm 5'4" and I have a 14-foot board. So stuff is not a great idea, and there's certainly no way that I can have a counterweight on the end of a board to try and carry it as well. So I knew that I had to carry all the gear on me as well, so I had to find kit that I could stash all the mandatory kit list on me too, and know that I could actually access it as well when I needed to. So there was a heck of a lot of training that had to go on, not just in terms of paddling and paddle times, but what was comfortable, what was safe, what was doable, what was the right footwear as well for all the portages. Did I need any extra support, because we've obviously got foot arches and we're standing up on them, and we're going flat-footed. Does that take your knee-hip alignment out of place? So did I need any extra support? What type of ground were we going to be scrambling on with the boards? You have to go out and you have to plan, and you've got to go and test it, destruction test it, because if you don't, it's not the time on the DW to find it out. Yeah,
and as you made a good point about the emergency kit. So what did you do with your kit then?
So I specifically looked for a chest-mounted buoyancy aid, which is mandatory. And I wanted one that was comfortable and warm, because I wanted to wear minimal layers. So my clothing was a really important choice as well. So I actually got one that was neoprene and had an aquapack pouch in the back, and then a chest mounted, but it was minimal and would all lay flat, but could also serve to keep me warm but wick quickly as well, opposed to a nylon based one. I also didn't want one with a zip, and being a female, having the right shape for you and where it sits under your rib cage, because obviously women are designed very differently to men, is really important, especially when we're doing this for hours and hours on end, and also take into account that we're wearing, underwear that has straps too. So something that fits and sits properly is really, really important. And then over the top of that, I had an ultra vest. So I also had 2 extra drink packs, because I'll carry water, but I'll carry electrolytes, because sometimes when you're paddling, you don't necessarily want electrolytes, you just want water. And then in the back of it, there's it almost looked like a hunchback. I had a pocket in the back that I managed to get hold of some really efficient ski thermals that fold down basically to nothing, because I'm small. So all of those sort of things, and the head torch were all stowed away in that, because you also can't have it all out on the front of you, because if you fall in on a paddleboard and you've got too much out the front, you can't get back on your board because it just gets hooked. So yeah, and then knowing where you were taking the fluid pipe, etc., and not having to move your head around the whole time, because that can send your balance over. It just takes a lot of thinking, and it's very personal. I'm sure it's the same in the boats as well, as to what you use and how you use it. But it's hours and hours of practicing and getting used to it too.
And what did you do for things like nutrition? As you say, obviously water and some electrolytes and things like that, but what did you do sort of generally for your nutrition in terms of obviously eating and drinking throughout the race?
Yeah, it's again very personal to everybody, and it takes a lot of getting used to, and I'd always advise people not to try something new on a race day, because it's not going to end well. Hygiene is also a really important part of it as well, because you're pushing your immune system to the max and you're in dirty water and dirty riverbanks. So how you're taking on that nutrition is really important, because if you're hand to mouthing with unclean hands, etc., you've got to be really careful. So we came up with the plan of on the vest I had lots of gels, which are great. They do what they say on the tin, so they're fine. And then I have guava blocks as well, which are natural sugar. And then on the cruise stops, I have a hot or lukewarm mix of oats and protein and a few other ingredients. So I just basically take that on as a big warm drink. So it's quite nice, because it feels like you're having, it's lovely, but it wouldn't be great on a hot day. And so then I've calculated how much and what ingredients go into that should see me through. And then so I'm just then topping up with the gels or anything else every 30 to 40 minutes, depending on conditions and where I'm at as well. And so, yeah, I'm never allowing myself to become empty, because that's the worst thing you can do as well. But also I'm never taking on massive amounts either, because equally when you're doing 4,000 stomach crunches an hour on a paddleboard, you can't have a full tummy. And lots of bananas as well, lots of fruit, blueberries, raspberries, just things that make you go, oh, that's quite nice, and cleans out your mouth as well.
So did you have support crew sort of feed you at portages at all, or because that is quite obviously commonplace in terms of obviously for the kayaks and obviously canoes, in terms of those crews, and that they'll just get fed while they're running along. I suspect it might be slightly different potentially, obviously from a stand-up paddleboard perspective, but yeah, how did you do that?
So my standing time was never more than 20 to 30 seconds. So I'd be great in a pints competition. I can open my gullet and it goes down. And then, because you've got your hands full with the board and the paddle as well. So it's a case of that, they would just pop something in my mouth and then run and show me the way, or get me across the road or whatever. And then that's great, but whilst I'm drinking that, they're filling up my aqua pack or putting stuff in the pockets or changing stuff over. And I'm really conscious of not littering when I'm doing these races or any training. So whatever I take and open, I put it in, and I've got a pocket that specifically all goes into, because you get to know your way around your kit. And then so they've got to empty all that out as well. And that's really good too, because then they can see how much I've taken on board, and if I'm slipping, they can give me a nudge and say that you need to just, you're not taking on enough. take on a bit more.
Has last year's race sort of inspired you to come back and give it another go?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Absolutely. I'm well up for it. I'm one of these terrible people that never enters till probably near to the last minute. But I'm telling everybody I'm doing it, so it's the accountability. I'm doing all this training, and the reason for that really is that I'm just watching the conditions and just making sure that I don't end up with this horrible flu or anything like that. And so, as long as all the weather gods and the health gods line up, I'm pretty much 100% there, with the caveat that if I'm ill, obviously I wouldn't put myself through an ultra. But yeah, no, I'm there. I'm definitely there.
And as you say, the window's been extended obviously slightly this year as well, so that gives a bit more of a wider window for you to play with a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I will probably feel spoiled by that. But what I'm really hoping for this year is, because we had such an awful year last year, that, it's beautiful flow and the wind's behind us and it's just one great downwind. I know it won't be, especially because Easter's early this year. So, listen, for me, I'm just trying to do my PB, because obviously I set my times last year. So I'd like to be on that money. Conditions playing out well, or do better than that, but who knows? Actually, you just getting through each day and being in one piece and feeling okay is win enough at the time. It's only when you look back and you think, oh yeah, I could beat that time.
As you say, this year Easter is early, probably nearly as early as it could be in the year, so completely different sort of climate almost. It sounds weird saying that, but with Easter it very much can be, in terms of later in the month it can be often quite baking hot and everything else, and earlier in the year can obviously be a bit more damp and a bit colder sometimes as well. How much sort of do you let that sort of come into your preparations in training, in terms of, I know obviously you say that you'll wait and always keeping an eye out on the conditions, but how do you then adapt your training to what you expect the conditions to be for the race?
So, I mean, look, the British weather is all over the place. So it's 12 degrees here today in Wales, and so I was paddling in very warm conditions but very windy, whereas 2 weeks ago there was an inch of ice everywhere. So we just don't know, do we? Whatever we think, tear up the rule book. So I think, again, the way I approach training is it's destruction testing. So I'm always training for the worst, which for a stand-up paddleboarder is wind and flow against, or very bumpy conditions. I would love to say I'm training for it to be 23 degrees, but I can't go and train anywhere that it's 23 degrees. And yeah, if it is 23 degrees, that's probably quite frightening for the planet that early on in the year.
Yeah, and I mean, how much training would you say? I know obviously you do a lot of training and you're very meticulous about how you go about your training. What would you say to someone thinking about doing the race in terms of how much preparation they should be? Like when should stand-up paddleboarders be looking, what sort of mileage should they be looking to achieve throughout like a given week, as an example, or on a single session? So what advice would you have for someone thinking about training for it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And obviously everybody's schedules are different, because we all work in different times, and some people can only paddle at certain times because of the weather. Like, the wind is not a friend for a stand-up paddleboarder at all. So you've got to really be realistic is the first thing. What can you put in? And as long as you are doing cross training, you can get some running in for fitness in terms of endurance. Or swimming's really good as well. If you can't paddle, then that's great. Get to the gym. There's lots of equipment in a gym that you can use as well. But that said, these things here need hardening out. You are going to absolutely micro bruise every part of your hand, because you're pushing down on the paddle each time you embrace it into the water. And that goes up through your body into your shoulder. And as I said, you're doing 4,000 million stomach crunches in a day's paddling. So if your body is not conditioned to it, it's going to hurt. So you've got to get out and paddle in those different conditions. And I would say that if you start your paddling now and you're relatively paddling fit and you can commit to getting in a 4 or 5 hour paddle a week and 2 sort of hour and a half paddles, then you're not gonna storm it necessarily unless all your other fitness is really good. But you can get round it and go out and time trial yourself as to see how you can cope and how many miles per hour or kms per hour you can do to meet those time trials against the race, because that's your marker really, and then adapt your training as and how you need to. But it's not going to feel pretty. I remember doing I think I did some blogs for you last year, and I did my first Brecon Canal, and it was 35-40k. And I just remember coming off the back end of it, just feeling absolutely exhausted. It was really cold as well. It was like 4 degrees and it was zapping my energy. And I kept slowing down because I was worried about the ducks. So by the time I'd done like round 3 of that, I was just blasting the ducks out of the way. I was going at a much faster pace. I wasn't so cold. The energy levels weren't going. So I was learning all the time. So you need to go and learn those things. And there's a million other things. You need to go and do those trial runs to learn about yourself and how paddling affects you, so that by the time you get to DW, you're pretty self-assured that you understand what's going to be in front of you and how your body's going to respond to it. And so, you can get your body to paddle for days on end, but can you do it at the pace that you need to do it at?
Yeah, and I know there might be some paddleboarders out there might be slightly concerned about the cut-off times that are in place, but I think it's fair to say, isn't it, they are attainable, especially now they've been opened up a bit more, because I know you and Paddy McCormack, sorry, who obviously both raced last year. You weren't just scraping in for those cut-off times. You were, you had a reasonable amount of margin, didn't you, each day in terms of,
yeah, we did, but not the second day. I actually thought I wasn't going to meet the cut-off time on the second day, and was it the second day that we were on the Thames? Yeah,
you would have finished at Marlow, yeah.
Yeah. Because it was so brutally hard in the wind. We had 1 foot, 2 foot waves coming up the Thames at us. And I remember getting to the lock and saying to somebody, "Oh, what's the time?" And a bystander said, "Oh, you've missed it." And I went, "Wow, I'm finishing really strong." Because at that time I'd been pushing so hard. I'd used up all my glycogen, and I was exhausted. But I gave it everything I got, and I think I got in by about 15 minutes. So, never give up till you're over the finish line is the first thing to say, because whatever anyone else says, they can have it wrong. But yeah, this is the point with the race. You never know how it's going to play, and train to know that you are giving it everything. Because listen, I wouldn't have minded had I not made it through. But what I would have minded would have been that I hadn't given it my everything because I hadn't have been fit enough. You can't control the weather gods, you can't control the environment gods, but you can control how you put yourself at it. And if you have that then it's great, because you've done the best you can.
Yeah, and one final thing, what would you say to sort of anyone that is thinking about taking on the stand-up paddleboard class either this year or next year and beyond? What sort of advice would you give anyone thinking about taking on the race for the first time?
Definitely dare to dream, because it's all doable. It really is. You asked a question earlier about the differences between stand-up paddleboard races that exist and this. I think what you've got to do is come at this race with a slightly higher level of professionalism than perhaps some of the races that we have for stand-up paddleboarding. That doesn't mean they're not professional, it's just they're more community-led. This is probably a lot more stringent in terms of what the rule book says or the manual says, and you have to adhere to it. And it's because it's such a big race and it's such a difficult race, and we've got all these little ducklings just going off and doing all these things that, if people don't understand it and know it and adhere to it, there's going to be big problems. So yeah, just be prepared to dig in, do what you have to do to get yourself ready, and know that you're ready to adhere to those rules, and you are in for the best treat ever. But the community is not there to help you, because you're not allowed any interference from anybody other than your crew to give you food or drink. So you've got to be ready that everything that is done on that race is done by you. And it's hard. It's really, really hard, but it's also an awful lot of fun.
Yeah, well, we can't wait to see you back out on the water again in a couple of months' time, doing it all again.
How long is that?
Yeah, it's literally just a few, isn't there? It's 3 months to go.
I do.
It's time is flying around. But no, it'd be great to have you back, and hopefully we will see many more stand-up paddleboarders take to the event as well. Yeah, it's good luck with the rest of your trading, and so we'll see you in a few months. But thank you very much for listening to this episode of My DW. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks' time with another episode. We look forward to seeing you then.